War takes a larger toll on a man's mental health than physical health. And The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien, the protagonist, who is named Tim O'Brien, describes events that occurred in the middle of his Vietnam experience. The Things They Carried catalogs of the variety of things his fellow soldiers in Alpha Company brought on their missions. These things included necessary items for war, their guilt, and their fear. This book explains dozens of stories on specific war experiences. One morning in late July, while we were out on a patrol near LZ Gator, Lee Strunk and Dave Jensen got in a fist fight. It was about something stupid, a missing jackknife. But even so, the fight was vicious. For a while, it went back and forth, but Dave Jensen was much bigger and much stronger, and eventually he had an arm wrapped around Strunk's neck and pinned him down and kept hitting him on the nose. He hit him hard and didn't stop. Strunk's nose had made a sharp snapping sound and he like a firecracker, but even then Jensen kept hitting him over and over, quick, stiff punches that did not miss. It took 3 of us to pull him off, and still it wasn't over. Strunk had to be choppered back to the rear where he had his nose looked after, and 2 days after he rejoined us wearing a metal splint and lots of gauze. In any other circumstance, it might have ended there, but this was Vietnam, where guys carried guns, and Dave Jensen started to worry. It was mostly in his head. After one afternoon, Jensen began firing his weapon into the air, yelling Strunk's name, just firing and yelling, and didn't stop until he'd rattled off an entire magazine of ammunition. We were all flat on the ground. Nobody had the nerve to get up. Jensen started to reload, but then suddenly he sat down and held his hand in arms and wouldn't move. For 2 or 3 hours he simply sat there, but this wasn't the bizarre part, because late that same night he borrowed a pistol, gripped it by the barrel, and used it as a hammer to break his own nose. Afterward, he crossed the perimeter to Lee Strunk's foxhole and showed him what he'd done, and asked if everything was square between them. Strunk nodded and said, sure, things were square. But in the morning, Lee Strunk couldn't stop laughing. The man's crazy, he said. I stole his flipping jackknife. Will Dave Jensen find out Lee Strunk actually did take Jensen's knife, and how will Jensen react? A few things I like about The Things They Carried is considered one of the finest books about the Vietnam War. Also, I like how O'Brien structured the book. It wasn't a sequential for a long time, and he didn't include himself that much in the story until near the end. So it wasn't much of telling the story. It was more of like him explaining different stories. I also really like the characters and how the characters connected to Tim O'Brien, and I think it was a good portrayal of the different memories that he had. Tim O'Brien brings to light the psychological impact of what soldiers go through during these times of war. We learn of the effects of traumatic events. The effects of traumatic events weigh heavier on the minds of men than all provisions and equipment they shouldered. Bam.